All right, this is my first live stream, so I'm figuring out a couple of things at a time. Thank you for your patience. Um, okay, my name is Sarah Cashmore, and I am the host of this channel, Piano with Sarah. I am a piano teacher based in Toronto, Canada, and I also really love to create videos and courses and webinars on all things related to learning piano, specifically for beginners. And so if you're interested in learning how to play piano, but you're not in a position to start with a regular teacher at this moment, I would invite you to check out my channel. I try to put out videos every week talking about beginner piano. My hope is that you will be able to find everything you need to get started in learning how to play piano, so that you can move on to the next stage in your musical journey. So today I have planned a live stream, a webinar on the topic of songwriting. Songwriting is one of my most requested classes. It seems like a lot of people are interested in learning how to write their own music, and they want to access their musical creativity, but it seems like they either don't know how to get started, they maybe don't know how to develop their ideas, or they don't know how to end their songs. So that is what I would like to help with today. I'd like to remind anybody watching that if you have any questions, to please feel free to chat in the box. I'll do a little chat myself. So if at any point during this webinar you have questions about something that I've said, you're welcome to leave a chat in the chat box, and I will do my best to answer it in real time. Okay. So with that said, let's get started. Let's talk about songwriting. Now, oh, hi Dave, thank you so much for joining. Before I share all of my ideas about songwriting, I thought what I could do is just tell you a little bit about my own songwriting journey, because I think a lot of people will resonate with the journey that I've had and the barriers that I've experienced. And I also just want to provide a little bit of insight into where I'm going to be coming from when I talk about the process of songwriting, because there is a lot of advice available online about how to write music, but not all of them are aligned in an emotional or a personal perspective. And so I just want to make sure that you know where I'm coming from so that you can tell if you're aligned with my approach to songwriting. So actually, let me set up. I've got myself a little, some slides to give you some visuals to look at as well. Let me just get this together. All right, that's the one. Okay, awesome. Okay, so my songwriting journey I kind of see as taking kind of four main stages. So at the very beginning, was back when I was a kid, I started to play piano. I have pretty much been playing piano all of my life. And what I think is really interesting is that the way that I started playing piano was actually starting to write my own songs on my grandparents' piano. My songs were very whimsical, they didn't really go anywhere. They were just songs that a kid would write, but they contained so much joy, and they were really exciting for me to put together. And whenever I went back to my grandparents and I could return to their piano, I loved playing these songs that I had made up. And at this point, my songs were not very well developed. They were just like whatever a 7-year-old would create, right? But they brought me a lot of joy, and they brought me a lot of joy to return to. I think that is kind of a main part of this. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got my start in playing piano. And, I did eventually take piano lessons, but honestly, I was not a very good student. I preferred, like, rather than learning songs out of a book, I preferred creating my own music. So when I was a kid, I wasn't really a great student that way. Moving on to my later years, when I was a teenager and young adult, this is where I kind of transitioned to the next stage of my songwriting journey, because this is when I started listening to other people's music. And I remembered that I had really enjoyed writing music as a kid, and I wanted to continue writing music myself, but I kept getting stuck, right? Because compared to these musicians that I was listening to, my ideas never really felt like they were good enough. I had a lot of musical heroes, and so I had like a lot of pressure on myself. And I also didn't really understand, thanks, Dave. I didn't really understand anything about the music writing process either. And so when I sat down at my piano or with my guitar, I was playing guitar at the time, I would just kind of like wait for inspiration to come to me. And if it didn't happen, I kind of took it personally. And I then believed that, like, oh, this must mean that I don't really have what it takes to be a songwriter. And like, especially when I compared myself with other kids in my high school or other, classmates in university, it seemed like all my friends were in bands and they all seemed to write music all the time. And it seemed to be so easy for them, yet for me, it was so difficult. And I didn't really understand why. I just assumed it was that I was the problem, that I just didn't really have that kind of talent. And so I just essentially gave up. I just petered out completely by my early to mid 20s. And I continued to have a desire to learn how to write music, but it never flowed. And so I figured it was just not for me. Moving on to my third stage of my songwriting journey was basically, over time, the internet came around and the internet got bigger and bigger. And I started to collect bits and pieces of advice about creativity in many different sources. So I enjoy all the arts, writing, graphic design, painting, crafting, you name it. And I took in a lot of information about creativity from all these different avenues. And I started to notice some similarities in what people were talking about when they talked about being creative in their own individual disciplines. I noticed that they talked about two main sources of struggle that artists can face. The first struggle is believing in your bones that creativity is a process and not something that just, it's just an inspiration. And this one really blew me away because this is exactly what I had thought about creativity. The idea that artists are simply inspired, that they get their ideas like just magically downloaded from heaven. Like, it's such a common trope in media, right? And I think this happens because it does seem like when you get inspired, it does really seem like magic, right? But it's also glamorized. It's glamorized for television. And I think that it puts this false narrative on what the creativity process is like. And I think that can be really detrimental to us sensitive types, right? So, so kind of the first struggle is believing that it should just happen. But you need to learn that expressing your creativity, it takes work. Sometimes you might land on a novel idea, but other times you really have to chisel it out, Sometimes you really have to, it's a craft, right? You have to work on it to chisel out what you want to say. And I think that we owe it to ourselves to forgive ourselves for the fact that we can't just be inspired whenever we want to, and to not get discouraged when we have to work at it, because that is part of the process, okay? So knowing that creativity was going to be a journey was half the battle. The second dimension of the struggle is the tendency that artists can have to make the source of our motivation something outside of ourselves. I think that it's very natural for this to happen. We live in community, and so we do things for each other. We do everything for our family. We do everything for work. And we do this generally so that things will go well for us, so that, in the hope that other people will like us. But this outward facing motivation can seep into our creativity as well. We want to make art that gets into shows. We want to write music that other people will like, perhaps so that we can sell albums, so we can, make a living off of our music. Or maybe, this even happens like in early piano lessons. Like some people start piano lessons because they want to win competitions. So these are external sources of motivation. And I saw over and over again artists in all kinds of different industries explaining that creating art for those external reasons really doesn't work. That's like a fast track to anxiety, perfectionism, imposter syndrome. And I think that this is, again, especially detrimental to sensitive types who want to feel connected to their creativity. So those were the two main struggles that I learned about, and I understood both of them because both of those struggles had really prevented me from writing my own music for many, many years. So what did I hear artists saying instead, like what we should do instead? The message that I heard over and over again is that the actual struggle of creativity is learning how to create music for ourselves. I've said before on my channel that your musical gift, it really is for you. Your musical gift, any music that you write, any art that you create, it's great if we can bless other people with it, but it's not made so that we can bless other people. I firmly believe that our musical talent is a gift for us to have a totally unique way of communicating that exists outside of, logical communication, like communicating with words. When we can communicate with music, music is a symbolic force, and and the ability to be able to do that truly is a gift that is for us. Now, it sounds very easy to say, but this is actually the struggle and the challenge of creating music, because if we create music for ourselves, it means that we're necessarily building things that have never been done before. And this can be a source of incredible fear and judgment for people. Thank you, Dave. Yes, exactly. Create for yourself. This is exactly the heart of what I want this webinar to be about. It is so worth it to create music for yourself because the uniqueness of what you create contributes to the incredible experience of life, and honestly is, I think, part of what makes life so marvelous. So if you feel that you have a desire to create your own music, please start, okay? And these artists that I learned about, that I was learning from, they did offer their own processes for creating music, and I noticed kind of the same ideas or the same processes being used over and over again. And so I basically took these different ideas from different industries and I tried to shape it to apply specifically to music, because music is a very specific art form. And once I did this and applied it to myself, I started enjoying the process of songwriting again. And so that is the process I'd like to share with you today. I also want to let you know that right now, the stage that I'm at in my songwriting journey is that my music is for me. Oh, hi, welcome, Code Me. Oh, okay, great. Thank you for your question about the chorus. I will talk about that in this webinar, so stay tuned. So yeah, I wanted to let you know that my songwriting journey has led me to currently writing music simply for myself. I don't currently feel compelled to try to sell my music. I don't share my music with very many people. It's my own reflective process, but I enjoy it a lot more than I ever did before. So I'm really excited to share that with you. Just before we get into the actual process, I want to go into my last stage of my songwriting journey, which is right here. And this is me coming into my current position as a teacher. I just want to say very briefly, once I started teaching online, I started seeing more of what's out there in terms of music education. And what I noticed is that a lot of the advice that I saw online about writing music was about how to write music that sells. Learning how to write music that sells is a completely different goal than learning how to write music for yourself. The advice that I see online about learning music that sells is all about like how to write hooks, how to write music that people can't stop listening to, how to sell albums, exactly the kind of external sources of motivation that I was talking about earlier, right? But I'm hoping that today I can convince you that you don't really need those tactics. You know what? I'm not going to try to convince you of anything, actually. If you want to figure out how to write music that sells, I release you and I bless you and I wish you the best. I wish you the best in finding other sources of information for that. This current webinar is not for that. This is not about learning how to write music that sells. This is about learning how to write music that is personally satisfying to you. I would like to also hopefully show you that you can connect with other people through your music if you start from a place of authenticity, and you don't need tactics to get you there. You need a reframe of your mindset to get you there. So that's what I hope to talk about today. Let me just check the chats and see if there are any questions so far. Thank you, Dave. I'm so glad that you have gotten that message in our lessons. I really enjoy them. For those of you who are new to my channel, I teach piano lessons online. So some of my current online students will be joining us in our webinar. Dave is one of them. Thank you so much. Yes, that's right. Music absolutely elevates your spirit, or it can if you let it. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. Okay, then without further ado, let's talk about the actual act of songwriting. So what I'm hoping to show you today is a process that you can follow that gives you a little bit of guidelines in terms of knowing where you can start, and then also like helping you develop the courage to move through each stage, okay? I didn't realize how big a part mindset was going to play in this webinar until I started planning all of this. But mindset is everything. And this process that I'm about to show you, the 4 stages of songwriting, these are stages that each stage requires its own level of courage. Sometimes they require a lot of courage. But if you're interested in sharing music with others, you will find an audience no matter what comes out of these different stages. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. So the 4 stages, as I put them together, this works for me, sharing what has worked for me in the past. The 4 stages involve, first of all, exploring. So having open-ended, open-minded exploration at your piano. Second stage is pinning, not pining, but pinning. So pinning down. Once you've done some exploration, then you need to get to a point where you pin down some of your ideas that you would like to develop further. So I've got some tips on that. After you've pinned down a few ideas, then you're going to want to refine them. And I have collected a whole bunch of tips. One of the reasons why I created a PowerPoint was to have visuals to include with these, because rather than just telling you how to refine things, I thought it would be a bit more accessible if I showed you kind of a visual representation of what refining can look like. So I hope that works for you. Please let me know. And then last, once you've refined your work, then it's important to enjoy it, or this is the goal, right? And it was really important to me that the final stage is enjoying your work rather than sharing your work, because I think that sharing your work ends up being a goal, like an ultimate goal for a lot of music writing teachers, but it doesn't necessarily align with what the person what the person writing the music actually wants to do. So you don't have to feel any obligation to share your music once you've written it, but hopefully if you've gone through each of these stages, starting from place of joy and delight, hopefully by the end of it you will be able to enjoy your music. Okay, so then let's get started. So let's talk about the first stage. The first stage is exploring, having open-ended exploration at your piano. I want to emphasize that this part is lighthearted. This is, before you actually try to write anything, I think it's really important to try to experiment at your piano. And this starts with trying out sounds in an open-ended and very positive way, and trying sounds that you've never tried before. And this can be a little bit awkward at first. You may not always like what you hear when you're experimenting in this way, but it is really important to experiment because you need to learn how to use your instrument. If you are new to the piano, knowing a little bit of music theory can help. But I don't like when people get over invested in music theory, because knowing music theory isn't going to help you write good music. Music theory just tells you what notes and chords tend to sound good together. They're not going to tell you what to write, okay? So if you're new to the piano, the theory that I would recommend kind of learning and maybe limiting yourself to is the notes of the piano. So knowing how to find A, B, C, and so on by yourself. And then also learning which chords tend to sound good together. So I've mentioned before that in any major key signature, for example, the 1, 4, and 5 chords always sound good together. They always sound really nice. And so those are the ones that I tend to start recommending. Once you're comfortable with the 1, 4, 5 chords, then you can move on to the 2, 3, and 6 chords. That's all I'm going to say about that for now, because it's getting a little bit further into music theory. I already have videos on that on my channel, but suffice it to say, you don't need to know a lot about music theory in order to get started with your experimenting, but it can help to know a little bit so that you know what you're trying to do, okay? So music theory can help you learn your notes, but what I find is even more important than knowing your notes is feeling and truly believing that the piano is actually on your side. You need to feel like your piano is a friend, right? Like if you sit down at your piano, and I see this so often with students that I work with, and I felt it myself, like if you sit down at your piano and you feel like your piano is going to out you as an imposter or as a fraud or as someone who doesn't really have a lot of talent, you're never going to feel truly open with your piano. And so you'll never truly collaborate with your piano. And so it really is important to come to a place where you believe that the piano is actually on your side. The freedom to explore at your piano really is more about this mindset, this component of mindset, than the actual skill. If you are struggling with feeling that maybe your piano is not exactly on your side, I encourage you to go back to what we were saying before about your musical gift being for you. Your piano is not trying to show you up. Your piano is trying to give you an outlet to express yourself. It wants to work with you. Just remember that your music is for you. You don't have to share anything that you come up with anybody else. You're there for you, and your piano wants to support you. This idea that creativity acts as a magnifying glass to your heart. What I mean by that is, like, You know, if you put a magnifying glass up into the sun, it's going to like magnify the heat and it will like make whatever's under it really start to burn, right? Creativity kind of acts like that for your heart. Whatever your true intentions are with your heart, the act of creativity is going to magnify that, and it's going to be very apparent to you what your intentions are. So, for example, if your intention is to create music that communicates yourself, the act of doing this creativity is going to magnify that. But if your real true intention is that you actually hope that you write a song that will impress other people, if that's your true intention, then creativity is going to magnify that feeling. And if your true intention is to impress other people with your writing, creativity is going to magnify that, and you are going to get sucked into a vortex of anxiety, perfectionism, self-doubt, imposter syndrome. So, yeah, I guess you can't hide, right? Like, you can't hide your true intentions. I really encourage you to start from a place of wanting to connect with your own creativity. Yes, that's right. Oh, Dave. Yes, I know that your instruments are your best friends. It's really wonderful to see your exploration with them every week. It's absolutely fantastic, and I'm so glad that it brings you that much joy. Okay, so if you are looking for advice on how you can keep a light, open heart when you're experimenting at the piano, my first piece of advice is to relieve yourself of the pressure to write a hit, okay? To start, let's just start by writing a song, okay? Let's write a song rather than the song. That's gonna really just like, sometimes when I work with students who want to write music, they want to write a song that is just going to fully encapsulate everything that they've ever felt or experienced or wanted to communicate. And it's just that's not really how it works. Just start with again, your musical gift is for you. It's for you to enjoy today. Whether anybody else likes it is of no concern to us, okay? It's wonderful if you want to try to write music that connects with other people, but you need to be centered in your own value and the value of writing music for yourself before you, like, in order for you to finish a song and for you to be able to share it to others. And so instead, I recommend follow the curiosity of what would it feel like, what would it look like to write a song from start to finish? What would it feel like to just complete a song? Not the song, a song. A song that is completed has a clear beginning, middle, and end. And you will learn so much from just completing a song. Even if it's not a song that you're totally in love with, you will learn so much just from the process of writing a song from start to finish than you would starting like a million hooks that you love and you can't put down, that you don't ever actually finish, okay? So let your authentic self be the filter that allows the right people in versus filtering yourself to seem more acceptable. Yes, okay. So related to the idea of acceptability is the fear of actually being yourself at the piano. So often in life, we filter who we are in order to be acceptable to other people. So this might work in the office where you have a job to do and you have people to get along with. But it doesn't really work with music, at least not sustainably, because music is a creative practice. And for creativity to be sustainable, it needs to connect with the creator's true vision and values. So filtering what it is that you want to say and how you say it is going to cause our work to become diluted and insincere. And it will lead to us feeling anxiety and imposter syndrome when we do write music. So instead, what we can do is we can strive to just be authentic and let our authentic selves be the filter that lets the other right people in. Do you see the difference? So rather than putting a filter in front of yourself that you use to project out into the world, you use yourself as the filter that filters people in, so that the majority of people stay out there, but only the people who are truly aligned with you and resonate with what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say, they're the ones that will be allowed to be filtered in. This was a really big change. Just a small aside, this was a small change that I made in my approach to social media. I decided that rather than trying to appear to have everything put together to be perfect, I was just going to be my authentic self and let the right people be filtered in. And I have to say, it completely changed my experience of social media. And I feel that it has filtered in people, students, audience members who are much more aligned with what I'm actually trying to do than before when I was trying to impress people all the time, right? So, related to this, if you can take on this kind of a mindset so that you yourself are the filter that lets people in, it changes the way you approach your piano, because now it really is just you and your piano. You don't have anyone else to impress. It's just you and your piano. So this can just be really, really effective. Chasing other people's likes, it's a direct path to anxiety and burnout, because you're contorting yourself into these shapes that you think other people want you to do, but you don't even really know. you don't even guarantee that that's even what they wanted from you in the first place, right? So let go of that. If you struggle with the idea of accepting your own honesty, if maybe this is something that it's not really a habit that you're in, accepting your own honest flow, I recommend trying journaling. This was really helpful for me. Starting a practice of journaling helps you, if it can stay as a private journal, it can help you start to express your thoughts, your real thoughts, which you may have never admitted to anyone before. Regardless of whether or not they're very pretty or acceptable, but journaling can be a great practice. It takes time to build that skill. And another way that you can keep a light and open heart when you're exploring at your piano is to just focus on one emotion or experience at a time that you want to express. So it really helps if you have, when you're trying to write music, it can help to have something that you're trying to express at your piano. But sometimes my students bite off a little bit too much. And they try to write, again, the song that's going to encapsulate everything. And they want to write a song that's going to be meaningful to everyone, that everyone's going to get something out of. Try to remember, your music does not have to resonate with everyone all the time, okay? When I think about the influential musicians in my life, they have each touched on a different experience or emotion or question that I had at the time. Just because they didn't reflect every emotion I'd ever felt didn't lessen their value to me. What was valuable to me about them was just the fact that they'd been willing to do the work of turning that one emotion or question into music. And so as songwriters, let's try to do the same. Let's release the responsibility of appealing to everyone at all times and instead focus on expressing a single experience or emotion at a time. Great, I'm just going to check the... Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for letting me know that this resonates with you. That's really helpful. Just a quote that I found while I was putting this webinar together that really resonated with me which is Duke Ellington. You've got to find some way of saying it without saying it. And this to me is like the beauty and the frustration of writing music for piano, because piano is a symbolic, or music is a symbolic art form, right? We don't always have words to simply say what it is that we want to say. With music, we have to try to communicate these things musically, sometimes without words. And so just figuring out how we can do that just using the sounds of music is, to me, just part of the journey. Okay, so after you've been exploring for a while, stage number 2 is pinning some ideas down. So congratulations, you've made it through the first phase of your songwriting career. You've gotten comfortable exploring on the piano, or if you're not entirely comfortable, at least you've built some courage to be able to do this authentically. At some point, you are going to have to pin down some of the ideas that you've collected to develop further. So this means going through your experiments and starting to choose sequences that you might want to develop. Okay, so what constitutes a sequence can be very open to interpretation. Okay, it could be a couple of notes, it could be a chord progression. It's just anything that you can repeat later, something that's repeatable or something that you can remember. Okay, and I have tips in how to do that on the next slide, but I just want to talk a bit about the mindset aspect of this, because it's the mindset that is so important to get right before you can do any of the other stuff. Okay, this step can be very challenging for people because things start to get permanent, they start to get real, right? And taking a stand on some of the ideas that you find interesting can be a whole new level of difficult for some people, right? Because it requires a whole new level of self-acceptance. I just want to remind you that the thing that makes selecting ideas nerve-wracking is usually a sign that you've been focusing on the external reception of your ideas. If you find it difficult to pin down ideas, 9 times out of 10, I bet the reason is because you wonder if other people would like that idea too, right? But we can coach ourselves through this by remembering, 1, that our musical gift is for us, and 2, if we show up authentically, our ideal audience, should we choose to share our music, will resonate with it as well, because they have already been filtered in through our authenticity, right? So yeah, just this musical gift, this journey is really for you. So try to enjoy it with a spirit of lightness, okay? All right, so now I'd like to give you some ideas. I'd like to outline some ways that you can tune in to what might be resonating with you, okay? Okay, so ways to tell if you like an idea. 1, if you're playing something and you feel kind of curious to see where it could go, where it might lead to next, that feeling of curiosity. Another feeling is the feeling that you could expand something, that you have more to say. If you just had a little bit more time to work on it, you could develop it. That's a feeling to pay attention to. 3, if a follow-up idea just magically comes to you. If you're playing one of your experiments and a follow-up melody or chord progression just kind of comes to you, that's showing you that's a live one. So that might be one that you want to carry on. A feeling of urgency that just says, like, I have to try this one. Even if you have no idea where you might go with it, you just feel like the sense of urgency. That's a good feeling to hold on to. And last, and kind of overlooked, is if you don't have any ideas, you don't think you have any ideas, but you keep coming back and repeating a sequence over and over again. Like something that you've come up with, like a lick or something like that. And and like it doesn't feel inspired. It doesn't feel like it has like the sparkle that you would imagine inspiration or inspired music to have, but you keep coming back to it, you're repeating a sequence because it's doing something for you. So rather than judging it and evaluating it, pin that one, take that one, be like, okay, this is something I'm going to hold on to for later. Okay. When we're choosing ideas, I just want to go back to what I was saying before about there being a lot of advice on YouTube about like how to choose the right ideas. This is the choosing stage, right? And I'm really talking about choosing based on how you feel about your music. But if you're like me and you spend a lot of time on YouTube looking at a lot of people's opinions, then you probably have come across YouTube educators who encourage you to use their chord progressions or their melodies, or like, I should choose something that has a bit more of a hook or something like that. We're not going for that here, okay? Stay away from that. You are not going to develop your own musical voice if you're just collecting somebody else's ideas, okay? If you are using other people's ideas based on the fear that you can't create your own, you are just trying to replicate their success, and you're not going to develop your own musical voice if you're just trying to replicate somebody else's success. Now, if collecting chord progressions sounds fun to you, then by all means, have fun. You can collect chord progressions the way that visual artists collect watercolor paints, You can collect many, many colors. You just don't have to feel obligated to use them. Just use the ones that spark joy, right? Take tips from other people on YouTube if you want, but try to move forward in a spirit of lightness and the feeling of enough, that my ideas are enough as I choose them. Okay. Oh, amazing. I'm really glad this is resonating with you. Thank you so much. Okay. And then if you want ideas for how you can actually pin down your ideas, then I've got a couple of ideas here. So the first stage in pinning something down is like giving them some permanence, right? So you have to find a way to collect these ideas so that you can work with them, because we're going to refine them next, right? So the refining stage needs something to work with. So how are you going to pin down your ideas to work with them? Couple of ideas. So notation. I've talked about having a notation book in the past. This is my little notation book. This is where I collect my ideas. This is where I pin down some basic ideas at my piano. That does require you to know how to write down notes. If that's not your thing, no problem. You can also try recording. So with piano specifically, you have two ways of recording your ideas. MIDI is when you MIDI is a way of plugging your keyboard into your keyboard so that the program or the software, excuse me, does the notation for you in the software. But another way of doing it is just doing an audio recording. You can also plug in so it just captures your audio. So it doesn't show you. So the difference between these two is that when you do it through MIDI, it shows you the notes, but you don't get to use any of the sounds, the cool sound effects that are on your keyboard. It will be whatever piano sound is available on your computer. Okay, so, and those tend to sound a little bit more robotic. The benefit of going through an audio, like an audio recording or doing a line in, is that if you had any sound effects or a particular sound at your keyboard that you really liked, the audio recording will record it exactly the way that you played it at your piano. It just won't show it to you in terms of the notation. You'll just have the sound of it. So whichever you prefer. If you would like some guidance on the difference between MIDI and line in audio, let me know, and I can look into this as a future webinar. But just so you, for now, I'll just say like these are two of the options that you have. If you don't know how to write notes, if you don't know how to record, maybe just jotting down chord progressions. Like if you know your basic chords on the piano, that can be another way of doing that. You can also draft out some of your lyrics if you feel that you have words coming along with some of these experimentations that you've been doing. I think the important thing here is to try different combinations of things. Something that I find really interesting about creativity is that, like, no one seems to have a problem understanding why a visual artist or a graphic designer might want to prototype different versions of a poster before they land on the right one, right? They'll do rough sketches, they'll sketch up some ideas, maybe they'll put the title up here, maybe now they'll try it down here. They move things around, right? And they're just prototyping. We call this like iterative design, right? No one seems to have a problem understanding why a graphic designer might do that, yet it seems to be so far from people's ideas that a musician might approach composition that same way. The experiments that you were doing were really just like rough sketches. And right now, when you're pinning down your ideas, you are just kind of working with these rough sketches. But you can now start to combine them in different ways just to see what's possible, just to see where these things might go. And I encourage you to retain a spirit of lightness by telling yourself, no one's judging me, I'm just seeing what's possible. And you're not committing to anything yet, you're just trying different things, all right? You may find that one way of doing things strikes a chord. My own personal way of doing things is I try to come up with at least 3 different combinations of my different ideas, just to be able to tell myself that I at least tried, right? And I'm often surprised how the first idea that I thought was really great ended up being overshadowed by a later idea that I loved even more. So I encourage you, try different things and use pencil. Don't lock yourself in too early. I'm just gonna check for questions. Excellent, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so then if you, once you have a few favorite ideas, you can start to build upon them and expand them into something that's going to resemble a song. And so that means we have moved on to the refining stage. So just give me 1 second here. So I see the stage of refining as being the stage where you polish your ideas until they start to resemble the idea that you had in mind for them, okay? A lot of people think that they have to get into the weeds of music theory here when they are getting into refining their work. I get a lot of questions from people asking me, like, which theory principles should I use to define, to complete my work, for example, in order for their music to actually sound musical. But instead of dominating the conversation with music theory, which I don't actually think is that helpful, I kind of think that it's more helpful to think about songwriting using general principles of artistic design. In the previous slide, I was mentioning how, I borrow a bit from graphic design when I think about the process of creating. In my refining stages, I do too. I'm going to borrow principles that I learned from graphic design. The reason why I think that this is more helpful than simply using music theory is because graphic design is also an art form where you're trying to communicate something without necessarily using words. So I think that there's a lot of overlap here. Yes, I'm going to share. I've collected design principles that I think are relevant to music, or I've adjusted them to music in order to help us know what to do with our ideas. Okay, so awesome, I'm glad you're on board. Okay, so now just before I start getting into those principles, I just want to make sure that you understand what you have to work with. So anything that you've created at this point is like, it's either a melody or a chord progression, something like this, right? each of your melodies or chord progressions are going to have its own contours or characteristics that you can play around with, okay? The ones that I tend to settle on the most are pitch. So pitch is how high or low you're playing, like if your melody goes up or down, starts high, starts low. Timing, so whether your piece is slow or fast, or if you're playing short notes versus long notes. Dynamics is whether you're playing loudly or softly. Dynamics can also mean if you're increasing in volume versus decreasing in volume. And then shape. So the shape can be like the shape of each individual sound. Like if you're playing short notes or smooth legato notes, these have different shapes, okay? So shape can be referred to each individual sound or your melody as a whole. So like a melody that has only a very little bit of movement, like I think of like happy birthday, right? Happy birthday to you. There's not too much movement there. Happy birthday to you. Oh, there's a little bit more movement there. Oh, now this next part has a lot of movement. Happy birthday, dear. You know, so that's kind of thinking about the overall shape of your sound. So with the principles that I'm about to show you, the strategies, we can use these strategies according to, we can apply them to the pitch, the time, the dynamics, and the shape of our music. I hope this makes more sense as I go through it. I'm going to give examples, okay, let's go. Are you ready to see the design principles that I've come up with? Okay, now I need some coffee. Give me a second here. These are the design principles that I use the most and that I encourage people to think about when they are developing their own music. Design principles provide some structure to the elements that you're working with so that when your audience notices that you're using a pattern, like using one of these principles or maybe breaking the pattern, they recognize that you're trying to tell some kind of a story. Okay. We'll get into this in a second, but I also want to say that using design principles also helps us feel like we're doing more than just stringing together random melodies. It gives us a bit more purposefulness with how we string our melodies and how we develop our songs. So like we might come up with our ideas randomly, but how we use them is purposeful, and how we use them gets to be a point of pride. This is where we get the pride in our songwriting that I'm very excited about. Okay, so I have selected the principles that I find the most relevant to music. I will just read them to you and we will go through each one individually, okay? Balance. So the first three are the top three that I recommend first for beginners to songwriting. Balance, contrast, and repetition. Then if you're ready to move on to more intermediate ideas, we move on to movement, hierarchy, and emphasis. And then if you're an absolute master and you're ready to just kind of polish up your song, then we get into color, space, and unity, okay? So let's get into it. Let's start with balance. Okay. Balance is when you distribute the elements of your song evenly so that you create some stability, right? Balance is essential for creating a sense of stability and harmony in your composition and making sure that no part of your music overwhelms the rest, okay? Balance also helps your listener feel like they know what's coming up. They know what to expect, okay? So some examples. If your musical excerpt, let's say, uses high elements, you might want to balance it out by including some low ones. If your music includes some fast elements, maybe include some slow ones as well. If you include some loud elements, maybe include some soft ones. So basically, this is a matter of making sure that you don't have too much of any one thing, okay? So when I'm, just to kind of give you an example of how I use this in my classes, in my songwriting classes, if someone comes to me with an excerpt of music that they don't know where to go with this piece of music, we'll listen to it together and we'll start picking out some of the things that they notice about that piece. We might talk about the pitch, we might talk about the timing, we might talk about the dynamics. I would say that usually the pitch is the first thing that we talk about, like where the melody tends to go. And balance is usually the first thing that I kind of go to, like, given this musical melody that you've come up with, is there anything else that you could do to balance it out? Is there any, like, what could provide balance to what you've done so far? And we'll explore ideas that way. And sometimes just thinking about the idea that your next phrase needs to balance out this one, or you want it to balance out this one, sometimes that can just kickstart ideas right away. Okay, just to give you an example of how I use balance. Now, one of the most common ways to provide balance in a song is the verse and chorus structure. So I'm depicting this here. This is your verse and this is your chorus. So each of these boxes represents a measure of music, so a full count. So if your song has a beat of 3, this would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If your song has a beat of 4, which most songs do, if you can clap along with your song probably has a beat of 4, then each of these boxes would represent 4 counts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so in most pop music, so if we're talking about like modern day Western pop or rock and roll, most songs have a structure where the verse is made up of 8 groups of 4 and the chorus is made up of 8 groups of 4. So let me show you what I mean. Actually, I'll give this a try. I don't know if this is going to work. I'll try it. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to move this over. If you can hear this. I'm going to play a chorus. I'll play the chord progression for a chorus, and I will count along. So, and then try to follow along these boxes. And this is just a way of like illustrating what I'm talking about, okay? I'll do the chorus for Imagine, okay, by John Lennon. Ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8, 2, 4. All right. Okay, so does that make sense? So what you may notice if you start paying attention to songs that you listen to, that the verse and the chorus are balanced out between 8 measures each. And so if you're just getting a start in songwriting, you might consider using this structure for your own song. And I am going to talk more about the difference between verse and chorus and how you can use a verse, how you can use a chorus. I'll also include talking about the bridge, because a bunch of people asked about that. For right now, I just want to explain that that there does tend to be a natural balance between verse and chorus. And if you're just getting started in writing your own music, you might want to, you could lean on this, on this structure, develop something into a verse, and then develop something else into a chorus. Okay. And doing this is not cheating. It's using a structure that other people know. Like if you do want to share your work with other people, or if you hope to, your audience is going to know the feeling of a verse and a chorus. So yeah, and laying it out this way actually makes your music easier to remember because it's so ingrained in our culture, right? Okay, so there's that. I'm just gonna have a quick little look to see if there's any questions. No questions. Oh, thank you. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the compliment. Okay, then let's keep going on to the next design principle. Design principle number 2 is contrast. Contrast is when you place different elements near each other in order to highlight their differences. Okay, so again, this is an idea that I kind of started taking from the world of graphic design, and I just apply it to music. So to start with my graphic design example, if I wanted to draw your attention to a big white circle, one way that I could do that is to just show you a big white circle. But it's a trick of visual design that in order to make the big white circle stand out as both white and big, you place something contrasting beside it. Now having this little tiny green circle with it, it just makes this thing stand out as a big white circle, right? The same thing happens with music. If you want to highlight something as being a high note, let's say, if you want to highlight a high note, you can make it seem even higher by placing a low one close to it. Similarly, you can make a short note feel shorter by overlapping them with long notes. And of course, the reverse works as well, right? You can make a low note seem lower by placing it next to high notes. Or, you could provide contrast. Like you could follow a soft verse with a loud chorus. Now, this is a huge trope in music where the verse is kind of soft and then the chorus is loud and it gets belted out. By belting out the chorus, you're emphasizing how soft the verse is, right? Building contrast in this way can be a way that you think about your own musical melodies. Now, while I was putting this together, I thought, well, what about times when the entire song seems loud? Like I'm thinking like punk, right? Like punk tends to be all loud and all fast. And so like, how can I say that they're using, or how are they using contrast in their songwriting? And when I thought about it, I thought, I think the thing with punk is that when the whole song is loud like that, I feel like they're contrasting against the quiet humdrum of society, right? Like there's an overall message there. And that just by virtue of being loud, they're contrasting with the quiet, demure society that they're kind of railing against, right? Obviously, I can't put words into anybody's mouth. I can't read anybody's minds, but if I had to guess, that's kind of what I would think. And yeah, I kind of like that idea. Okay, so yes, this is just to say that highlighting differences helps you direct your audience's attention to the things that you want them to pay attention to. So this is an element where you get to have more control over where your audience pays attention. If you want them to feel really loud and powerful, maybe you pump them up with a really loud chorus. But in order for the chorus to feel extra loud and powerful, maybe you start with a soft verse to give it that contrast. Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, like a cultural contrast. That is exactly what I mean. Thank you so much. Thank you for your insight. Okay, so that's it for contrast. I'm just going to check if we have any questions. No questions so far. Okay, so then principle number 3 is repetition. So repetition is when you reuse elements to create coherence and familiarity. You can add repetition by repeating your melody. So for example, if you have a line that you like, One way that you could consider building it into a song is just by repeating that line, right? Musicians do this all the time. You could also, if you don't want to do a direct copy of what you just did, you could repeat it, but maybe at a different pitch, maybe a little bit higher than you did the time before that. You can play around with that. I also want to mention that the verse chorus sequence that I showed you before is its own kind of repetition, right? In Western pop music, probably the most common sequence is here verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, chorus. So this is a songwriting sequence that is specific to music in the 20th, 21st centuries. Prior to this, with classical music, it was just basically like A, B, B, and that was it. That was the entire song. And then it kind of got expanded and evolved. And so now today we have the verse, chorus, bridge, chorus sequence. You can use this in your own song. I would say that the benefit of using repetition in this way is that it actually makes your music easier to follow and easier to remember. Sometimes students I work with feel like they have to create something new for every line, but when you're creating something new for every line, you're giving your listener more to remember. And so if that's important to you, that's something you might want to keep in mind. And you can use repetition to add that sense of balance that we discussed earlier, right? Repeating the verse, I'll just go back. Repeating the verse, repeating the chorus, this is providing balance, right? Okay, so that's repetition. Okay, moving on. Number 4 is movement. Okay, so now we're starting to get into some advanced concepts. These are intermediate, okay? I think that even though I say these are advanced and they might not seem immediately applicable, I think if you start working with them, you'll find that these are actually quite accessible. Okay, so movement is the sense of progression and change that happens throughout a piece. So this involves developing your musical ideas so that it contributes to the piece's forward momentum, the forward evolution. So if you were to use the verse chorus approach, that structure provides movement because the listener will know that you're starting with a verse, you're probably going into a chorus. And if you did a chorus, there may very well be a verse 2 for you to go to. If you have a verse 2, you almost certainly have a chorus again, right? It's propelling the listener forward. So that's one way of having, that's an easy way to provide movement. Some more advanced ways that you might want to think about movement is in terms of like what you're actually playing and the movement of the individual phrases. So if you have a lot of changes happening at once, we would consider this to be fast movement in your song. If there are few changes, if your chord progressions or melodies tend to last over long notes, then we would call this slow movement. And so this isn't like, as you're getting to know your musical ideas, as you're getting to refine them, you can start to think about what are some ways that I can, include balance, like we were talking before, into my movement now. Like if you have a measure that has like a lot of changes, how does that feel? Do you feel like you want to keep having that, or do you want to balance that out with some slower parts? And vice versa. If it's really slow and it feels like your song isn't really going anywhere, one way to add a bit more movement would be to add more changes to try to balance out, And I feel like as I'm saying this out loud, this feels like a lot to take in. But this is why it could be really helpful to work with someone who's experienced in writing music to just talk to you about your own songs, right? And this is part of why I wanted to create this live stream and make it available, because this is the kind of thing that, like, hopefully if you get value from this, you'll be able to come back and watch it over and over again. And get more out of it. So that's my hope anyways. Okay, moving on. Some other ways that you can get some movement into your song is by trying like a call and response. So a call and response is when a musical phrase or a melody is followed by another phrase that complements it or contrasts it. So, if you have a phrase that's kind of going up, finishing and following it with something that's going down, again, providing balance and contrast. It's all interrelated. But having that call and response propels the listener forward, like they add some movement. In the past on my channel, I've talked about the idea of exploring and then returning home. So this idea of like when you are going out and exploring different things with your melody, it's really nice for your listener to be able to return back to their home base or the tonic, right? If you are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, I will add a link to that video in the description of the replay of this so that you know what I'm talking about. But for everyone else who's familiar with that, the idea of exploring and returning home, when you're going out, you're propelling your song to have movement. When you're returning home, you're also providing movement coming back home. And it draws your listener in. And like, I don't mean that you're like hooking your listener and like they can't stop listening until you get back home. What I'm talking about is like inviting them on that journey with you, right? Like, if they know that you're exploring and they can tell that you're about to return home, it's like you're not leaving them guessing. You're inviting them to join you on that return journey. And that can be really nice for a listener if you decide to share with a listener, if you decide to share your song. But of course, your music is for you. And another thing, my last point here for movement is that if you feel that your piece is missing some movement, sometimes this can be an special challenge with piano, which can tend to like draw out a little bit. It doesn't quite have the same rhythmic feel as a guitar. So if you're writing music for piano and you feel like you're missing some movement, consider adding a beat to the background. Like if you have, a drum track that you could play against, and see if that helps. Because I've seen it happen before where a song didn't really feel like it was going anywhere, but as soon as they added a drum section or a rhythm section, then all of a sudden it picked up. So that's neat. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that one of the things that I really like about adding movement is that the progression of the musical ideas that you include in a song can resemble the person's experience of change that they experience through that song. And so when you have these overall, movements between verse and chorus, returning to your verse, returning to your chorus, sometimes that can mimic or resemble the change that a person is going through emotionally as they are going through your song. You're taking them out on a journey with that verse, bringing them home to some core message in a chorus, heading back out on a journey for a verse, and then coming back to a chorus. So that's kind of a neat thing about writing music. I promised that I was going to talk a bit more about the concepts of verse and chorus as a way of infusing movement into a song. This is a very established structure for music that I thought could be helpful to help you if you want to use these different components to know how you can use them. I'm not pretending to be the final expert on any of these ideas. This is just what I've noticed, and this is how I use these elements myself. But I've heard other people talk about this too, so I know that I'm not alone in thinking about it this way. Okay. So the basic idea is that the verse, the chorus, and the bridge serve different purposes in a song. And so this can impact what melodies and chord progressions you use for each of these components. And it can also impact like whether you use them at all or how you use them. And it also can give you guidance. Like if you have a piece of a melody or a line that you want to use and you want to develop and you're not sure how to develop it, thinking about like where in the song it might fit can help you build and can help you expand, right? Okay, so basically, I think I'll actually start with the chorus because the chorus is the most important here, okay? The chorus is the repeated part of the song, okay? If you have a song that has a verse and a chorus, chances are you're repeating the chorus more than once. The chorus tends to be the element of the song that is the most memorable, and it tends to carry a message. If you're using words, it tends to carry the message that is the actual core message of the song. In contrast, the verse kind of sets up this chorus. The verse is where we, provide a bit of backstory, or we have some examples of what we're talking about. It might be a reflection. If you have multiple verses, it might be because you have multiple examples of what you're talking about in the chorus. So when we're going back and forth between a verse and a chorus, the verse, you can think of like setting yourself up for this message that you have in the chorus, okay? The bridge, a bridge is not always included, but when it is included, a bridge is often is used as some kind of a contrast. And it's like, it's a contrast from the verse and the chorus. Maybe it's just like a sudden realization, or it's some emphasized statement that like tells a listener like I'm really serious about this. But the bridge is basically like an interjection that helps provide more detail than the verses did and adds a little bit more understanding to the chorus. Sometimes I've seen it actually where the bridge provides a new realization that actually changes how we understand the chorus. That one can be fun. But I've never done that successfully myself, so I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know how to advise. And I just want to back up through my comments because somebody asked about the chorus. Okay, so Code Me. I don't know if Code Me is still here because this has gone to be a pretty long live stream, but the comment reads that they do a lot of music production on hip hop and rap and then write lyrics for it, and I often find the chorus to be the most difficult part of the songwriting process. So if you're still around, Code Me, I welcome you to provide a bit more detail into what you find so difficult. If I were working with you personally, probably what I would ask is like, what have you been saying in your verses? And like, are your verses setting up a story or setting up examples like of what? What is the core message that you're trying to get through in your song? Like, or, and just to finish that thought, and like, if you have, does this help you create a core message that your verses all point towards, and like, or on the flip side, when you look at the stuff that you've written already, when you look at this this structure, have you already written the verses, or do you feel like any of those pieces could actually be the chorus? Maybe you find that there's a part that you've written that tends to get repeated over and over again. That could make a really good chorus there. Maybe you've written it already. So that's where I would go with that. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. So that was movement. Hierarchy is next. Okay, so we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're at 5 of 9. So I'll try not to go too much longer, but it looks like this is going to be a 2-hour event. So at any rate, thank you for those of you who are still here. If you need to back out at any time, I will have the replay available. Okay, but I appreciate everyone who's sticking with me so far. Okay, so hierarchy is when I think we mostly understand this in terms of print design. when you order elements according to their importance. So basically what I mean is like in the cover of a book, for example, the title is the biggest thing, right? It's the most important thing. It tends to have the biggest font. It's like top and center, right? Maybe the publisher details aren't that important, so it tends to be small print and down by the bottom. But basically, like how you order, your elements and how you provide this structure tells the listener, it communicates to the listener what's important about your song just by virtue of how it's structured, okay? So we've already discussed how the chorus usually contains the heart of the song, right? And so that part tends to be repeated. The repetition is important because it gets more airtime, right? The verse can be a reflection, an example, or a memory. The bridge can be an interjection or a realization. And what I want to show you on this next slide is what this looks like when you put each of these components in order. This is the hierarchy of the song if you use that structure. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, right? Just looking at this from a visual perspective, what has the most airtime? It's the pink sections. The pink sections represent the chorus. The chorus is the core. And so you are, when you're creating your music, I sometimes find it helpful to think about it visually like this because you get to see how much airtime your chorus actually gets compared to your verses, which just gets repeated or just gets played through once. They don't get that much airtime. And then the bridge, of course, doesn't get much at all. But this is what the structure of a song looks like. This is the hierarchy of the elements. And again, if you use this hierarchy, I'm not saying that you have to, but if you use a hierarchy like this that your audience recognizes, it actually lets them relax into your music because they know what's coming. But again, this is only if you want your audience to have that experience, right? Your music is for you. And so you get to decide what structure you use. But when you decide upon your structure, also try to think about the hierarchy. What am I presenting first, next? What am I presenting more of? What am I presenting less of? These are all really great questions to ask yourself while you are writing your music. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate you coming around. And please enjoy the replay when you can. Amazing. Next is emphasis. Okay, so we are getting, I think this is number 6. So emphasis is when you highlight certain elements to draw attention to them, okay? In print design, this might be like adding an underline under the title or something like that to really draw attention to it. But this is another area where you get to have control over how your music is written, and you get to control, if you decide to share it with a listener, what your listener is going to pay attention to and what they're going to notice about your music, okay? So you as the songwriter have a lot of power here because you get to draw your listener's attention to the importance, to the elements that are important to you, whether it's a particular melody, a lyric, or an instrumental part, okay? So we've already talked before about how like repetition and balance kind of let your audience sink into it because they know what's coming. And in a song, the default setting is usually that the instruments and voices are typically mixed at about the same level, right? And it's usually good to kind of start your song that way in order to just kind of give a general presentation of like, it lets the audience get a feel for what you're doing, right? But building emphasis means making a change to what was expected, so that you can draw your audience's attention to an element of your choosing. So for example, Could one instrument, if you really wanted to highlight what a guitar is doing, could that sound rise above others in the mix? If you are writing a song with lyrics in it, maybe would you be interested in emphasizing your lyrics a little bit by softening the other instruments, like making them a little bit lower in volume? So one example that I can think of this, of emphasizing your lyrics, I think of like Celine Dion and My Heart Will Go On. And there's this part, I'm not going to try to sing it, but there's a part where like the instruments cut out and it's just her voice. Like that is so much emphasis, right? And it's because she had like a nice, well-balanced mix of sound and then cut out the instruments where there's only one thing to pay attention to. And because of the element of contrast that we already discussed, her voice just, it rings out that much louder. It's that much more of an impact. And that is a way of, emphasizing your lyrics. Another way is changing the way a sequence is repeated, such as extra notes or a key change. Okay, so for example, you know what? My Heart Will Go On, I think, is another example of this, where, yeah, for the first part of the song, she sings kind of low, right? And then isn't there like a really big key change? I think it's been a while since I heard the song, but oh, fantastic. Thanks, Dave. I'm glad you like my charts, my visuals. Yeah, so like any kind of a key change is like a break from what's typical, what's been normal in the song. And yeah, that's another way to do that. And actually another example that I thought of for emphasizing your lyrics is Bryan Adams, Everything I Do It for You. When he sings at the end, like, die for you, he gets, like, his voice takes over and the instruments fall away and he's emphasizing his voice and it's all you can hear. And it's such a powerful way to add that extra element of tension, I guess, that ends up getting released when the music comes back in. So at any rate, okay, so that is emphasis. Last three. So now we are getting into the real complicated, more advanced. I think everyone can benefit from thinking about these things. But if you're just getting started, don't feel like you have to do all of these things. The last three are color, white space, and unity. Okay, so let's just talk about this. So color, we may not think of color as being something that naturally fits with music writing because music doesn't have color, or does it? Color, when we talk about color in music, we do use the word color to talk about the tonal mood or quality of an instrument, okay? So a trumpet will have, the sound of a trumpet will have a different color than a piano, for example. A trumpet tends to sound very bright, and a piano can sound more muted or dull, right? So we do use color terms of color and texture when we are talking about instruments. And we also use terms of color and texture when we talk about how these instruments overlay on top of each other. So this is something nice to think about when you're writing music, because if you are a multi-instrumentalist, maybe you would like to have a bit more, put a bit more thought into which instruments you want to feature in your songs. If you are just writing for piano, that gives you, it gives you a particular color or mood to your song that can then be balanced by other elements if you want to. So for example, each instrument you choose has a different mood or tone. So I would say that, and even like the different piano that you use, like I can think of some very bright pianos. I think Kawai and Young Chang are very bright sounding pianos. I think that Heinzman's, that's the brand of piano that I grew up playing, is a very warm, mellow sound, has a warm color to it. And when you combine different instruments, you combine those moods. So let's say you have a very warm piano sound. If you wanted to provide some balance and contrast, you know, what might you include with it? For example, like, do you think that you like how a bright trumpet sounds with it? Or would you prefer a bright trumpet with a bright piano? Or, you know, do you want all of your instruments to have like kind of a bright, clear sound? Or do you want it to be more warm? I also think about this in terms of like clear and fuzzy. So instruments that have distortion, like if they're plugged into an amp and they have a bit of distortion, that adds a bit of a fuzzy texture to it. You know, this is when you can like changing the different instruments that you bring in. There's like endless permutations, right? The options are infinite. But these are things that you can think about when you are creating your own song. The colors that you choose for your song contribute to its overall richness. And it may not be something that anybody notices, but if it's something that's important to you, you can choose combinations that feel really exciting or interesting to you. And that can be a real point of pride. And you might enjoy that more, having that level of flexibility and control. You might enjoy that more than just taking a safer, tried and true method that other people have already done. Okay, next is space. So the second to last one, we're getting very close to the end. So space is when you incorporate some silence or minimalism in your music in order to provide resting points. So if you have ever sung in a choir, or if you ever held a conversation and you're using your voice, you know that at certain points you need to pause so you can take a breath. This is basically what I'm talking about in terms of music. Taking pauses in conversation isn't just a matter of catching our breath. They're also really vital for us to have time for us to just kind of think and reflect on what we just experienced, right? Heard, or, whatever. And so providing space in a music composition, is a really great thing to remember, because oftentimes with beginner songwriters that I work with, they feel a panic that they need to cram as much music as possible into their composition because they don't want to lose their listener, or they don't want their listener to get bored. And at this point, this is when I usually try to remind people that conversation, whether it's in person with someone or whether it's musical, it does take a little bit of courage to stop talking for a minute so that the other person has time to reflect or has time to participate and kind of add their own emotions or their own thoughts to what's been said already, right? Music is no different. Throughout your composition, try to leave some space. If you're singing, try to leave some space in your singing. If in your instrumentation, it doesn't have to be instruments all the time. You can let the notes ring out and take a bit of a break. Again, an audience member who is aligned to what you're doing is going to enjoy those moments if you enjoy putting them in. Okay, we don't need to worry or panic about losing our audience's attention. Think about where you might provide some resting points in your own song, because that gives you a bit of freedom too, right? It's not just all about the listener. It also gives you freedom to reflect in the process of playing your own song, if you don't include a lot of space in a song, it tends to have a more frantic and frenetic pace. So I'm thinking about a song by the Bare Naked Ladies, where it's "The End of the World as We Know It." The verse is just like da 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 da. Like it's so fast paced and frantic, and I think it kind of feels like the end of the world. It feels frantic. And so, yeah. And so a general rule of thumb that I learned, that I heard back in the day was just to think like, when could your singer or your instrumentalist use a bit of a break in the song? If you think that they could use it after 4 measures, then fit it in there. Your listener could also use that break. And if your singer or instrumentalist needed a break, then chances are your listener could also feel the need for a break themselves. So it's something to think about. Okay, last but not least, unity. And just before I go on, I'm going to see if I have any questions. Oh, hi, Andy. Oh, awesome. A stop down moment. I've never heard of that. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so unity. This is kind of like a general philosophical principle, right? The idea is that when you're trying to bring unity into a song, you're trying to ensure that all the components of your work, of your music, work together harmoniously. Now, I can't really think that there's any specific trick that you can do in order to specifically get unity, because everything that we've been talking about in this webinar has contributed to unity, providing a sense of balance, providing bits of contrast, adding bits of emphasis, all of these different things, like each of those pieces contributes to creating this unity. And so when you have a song that has a great sense of unity, you basically have this feeling that every component in the song belongs. And it feels complete. It feels complete in its harmony, or it feels complete in its dissonance. Harmony and dissonance each have really important spots in places, and they play important roles in music. I might also say that one really easy way to get unity is to have consistency and timing. So consistency and timing in instruments are very effective at unifying a song. So if you have like the same pace drum beat going on in the background, that can really help to pull together a piece. So that can be sometimes helpful for beginners who aren't too confident in their songwriting skills. And also like a progression or a development, the way we were talking about like using hierarchy and using effective use of verse, chorus, and bridge. That kind of a progression of movement can also help to unify the song for your listener. Basically, in the end, you want to be able to say that you did your best to bring your various instruments, lyrics, melodies, harmonies all together, so that all together they contribute to a musical message that you wanted to communicate. And the process of pulling this together, like, I hope you can see now, like, songwriting is not a matter of just being suddenly inspired by a sudden flash of inspiration. These flashes of inspiration definitely happen, but like, it takes work to chisel out what you're really trying to do with these different flashes of inspiration. And so I want to encourage you that if you want to get writing, if you want to start developing your songwriting muscles, to just start, to be patient with yourself, to go through each of these elements, and in terms of refining, that initial melody that you came up with, or that initial chord progression, and see what you were able to come up with. And the idea is that at the end of doing all this, you'll get to the final stage of songwriting, which is enjoyment. So when you finish a song, by the end of it, you've put so much thought and purpose and intentionality into your music that you really deserve to celebrate and to appreciate your completed song. Now, whether you decide to share your song with others or just keep it to yourself, it really doesn't matter. Like your music is equally valuable just for the sake of just for the fact that you put so much effort into it. And whether you share it with others or not, you really deserve to take pride in your accomplishments. I think that, so bask in the joy and pride of what you were able to accomplish. And, you might be surprised which songs actually stick with you. So I want to emphasize for people who are just joining me now, I used to write music a lot when I was a kid. And this was before I got, I felt the pressure and I felt like I had to measure up to other musicians that I admired. And it's really amazing to me because the music that I wrote in my teens and in my 20s, where I was trying to be something other than I really actually was, musically, they turned into songs, what you would call a song. But the songs that I actually feel the most resonance with were the ones that I just created out of joy and out of sometimes not joy. Sometimes I wrote them out of a deep sense of melancholy, but they were just for me. It didn't matter to me what it sounded like to others. I was writing for myself, right? And those are the songs that hold a very special place in my heart. And moving forward, I would really like to encourage you that in order to strengthen your songwriting muscle, the best thing that you can do is to write music from start to finish, to complete a song. Because again, you will learn more from finishing a song than you would just starting a million songs that you don't ever take anywhere. And so when you are in the songwriting process, I encourage you to what I would encourage you to do if I was working with you is take one of the pieces that you've been experimenting with, pinning one of them down. So you pin one and then start to refine it. And the piece that you choose to pin does not have to be one that you're in love with. You don't have to be totally in love with it. Just practice the craft of finishing a song. And you may be very surprised that a song that you did not start out as being totally in love with, you end up building so much pride and accomplishment, a sense of accomplishment from that piece, just by sticking through it and finishing it. And in the end, if you do decide to share your work with others, I encourage you to share with others in the spirit of authenticity, that you are not trying to impress people, but you are trying to share an artistic creation that you made, and to do your best to only receive authentic feedback in return. So, sometimes we have to be a little bit careful about who we share our artistic gifts with. And if we feel that we're going to be judged, or if we feel that the person that, even just opening it online, if you feel like there's a chance that you might be judged or judged harshly or whatever, you don't have to share with everybody. You can just share with a couple of people who will give you the kind of authentic, heartfelt feedback that you are looking forward to. So next steps, which might be your first steps. So yes, I want to encourage you to write music often. Write music, try to make writing music a consistent element of your piano practice, your piano routine, your piano journey. It gets easier. It gets easier with time if you practice creating from this place of authenticity that I was describing at the beginning of this. And you learn so much about yourself when you maintain this practice of writing music. I truly believe that everyone has a creative spirit. Every person has the capability of expressing themselves through music, whether it's piano or another instrument. It really doesn't matter. And I think that any instrumentalist could benefit from these songwriting principles that I've just shared. Every person has a creative spirit. If you invite your creative spirit and accept what your creativity brings you, it will blossom. But if you feel embarrassed or ashamed, or if you criticize the ideas that you come up with, your creative spirit is going to retreat. So just keep that in mind. Self-talk, mindset is really so important when you are trying to build a songwriting practice. Thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around. So I want to let you know that, yes, I don't want to just leave you hanging at the end of all this. You don't have to do this alone. You can work on this alone independently if you want to. I expect to put the replay up so you can follow this again. I just wanted to offer you a couple of different things, okay? So first of all, I'm going to put in the comments that if you would like to receive a copy of the slides that I used for this, I'm happy to share them. I was wondering if you would mind filling out a feedback form as like a trade. So if you don't mind doing that, I will, well, thanks, Andy. I'll put the link in the chat. All right, so if you would like a copy of the slides, I would really appreciate if you could fill out the feedback form to let me know how I did. If you don't want the slides, I would still appreciate you filling out the feedback form. The replay will be available. I also wanted to let you know that if you're interested in working on your songwriting skills in a small group setting, I am willing to put together a small group. So what I'm going to do is put in another link down here. In the spirit of helping you complete a song from start to finish, I'd like to offer some small group support. This small group will basically, the way that I think it would be the best is if we met once a week for an hour, and we will simply practice the skill of completing a song, okay? It doesn't have to be, again, it's not the song that's gonna make or break your musical career. We are just practicing the skill of completing a song. So I think it would be best if it was myself and up to 5 participants, keeping it small, so just a total of 6 people. And we will actually work through all the steps that I just described and apply them to a song that you'll work on, of your choosing, of your creation, okay? If you're wondering how this will work in terms of meeting, the video client that I use is called Riverside. It works very similarly to Zoom, but I find that it's easier to use and it has better audio quality. So if you click on the small group setting link there, there's a link that will take you. It just explains a little bit more of it, okay? And so basically, we'll meet on Riverside for an hour. And to get the most of this class, you should be prepared to play some music for all of us. This is going to be a very low pressure environment, very friendly and supportive, because we're all going to be creating music. Like, I will do this as well with you. And what we're just going to do is practice writing a song from start to finish. So to get the most of this, you should have your instrument close to your computer. And you should be prepared to play it and to listen to feedback. You can ask questions. We'll all use the same slides. Like, I'll make sure everybody has slides and stuff, right? So that we can talk about the different elements of the songs that we're trying to work through. And yeah, let's just practice the craft of writing music together, okay? Again, it doesn't have to be a song that you're totally in love with. We're just practicing completing a song, okay? You may not love it, but you know what? I didn't love my early songs either. And now I totally love them because they reflect the beauty of the sincerity that I was trying to express in those days. So I love it. And I want you to love it too. Okay. I'm going to see if there are any questions. I think that's it for me. Why are you so unselfish? Thank you. This has been, I really appreciate you saying so. The ability to write your own music, I think, is every musician's birthright. I believe this from the heart of my being. I think that writing music it's so profound. It is such a profound aspect of a person's musicianship, and I think that it is the element of a person's musicianship that actually makes it their own. Not everybody would agree with me. I know that not everyone identifies as a creative person, but it's so important. And with all of the information that's out there in terms of how to write hooks and how to write music that other people will feel is catchy, I just felt that I wanted to provide, I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see in the world. You've heard that before. I needed to do my part to provide a different way of seeing things. And I know that I could have put this behind a paywall, but the information is so important to me that I really felt that I wanted this to be free and accessible to anybody who wanted to do this, not just to people who could afford the information. As you'll see, like these small group sessions are not free. So for the small group attention, I do charge. But you don't need to be part of the small group in order to benefit from what I just talked about. If you have more questions about this, or if you're, at a certain point in your songwriting journey and you could use a person just for feedback, I'm happy to talk, I'm happy to book just one, session to talk about things. You're welcome to write me questions. And this is part of why I created a YouTube channel too, right? It's just I love helping people figure things out so that they can do things on their own. That's kind of my goal as a teacher, is that every one of my students will eventually feel so confident that they won't need me anymore, which will be a sad day for me, but a happy day as well, right? Hi Lee. Oh, it's so nice of you I'm glad that you're able to show up anyways. That's okay. The replay will be available. Oh, David, thank you so much. Jason, maybe another topic for songwriting could be influences. That's an interesting idea. Could you describe a little bit more about what you mean by that? Influences. Do you mean like learning how to write in a particular style? I had all this coffee and I didn't even need it. Okay. Well, I'll sit for a few more minutes in case there are any questions, but another thing I'm going to put in the chat is my email address. If you have any questions ever in the future about songwriting, about anything that I talked about here, I'm going to include my email address. So that's hello@pianowithsarah.ca. You can also use the contact form on my website if that's easier for you. Like writing your own version of a Beatles song. Oh, that's fun. Yeah. So, okay, that is something I could talk about because I'll give just like a little bit of an overview now. I can't talk specifically about what it would take to write your own version of a Beatles song. I feel like that would take a bit of analysis. Like you have to listen to some songs and kind of pull out the some of the overarching themes that you think is like similar to makes the Beatles, right? Yeah, definitely you can start to write music in that style. I can talk about that more. But the question also comes up like, is it really songwriting if you're using somebody else's style? And I do have thoughts about that because like if you're okay, I'll give the bottom line rundown. If you're writing music in the style of someone else because you think their style of music is legitimate and yours wouldn't be, then I would say like that's probably not a very heart aligned, a very expansive, very authentic way of making music, right? But if you want to make music in that style because it sounds fun and it seems like it'd be fun to do, then by all means go for it. Like that would be amazing. The other thing I'd want to say about that is that sometimes you could be surprised how much starting a song in someone else's style ends up becoming your own. I had a song that I wrote back when I was like 18 years old, and it was, when was it? What year? Okay, so it was basically inspired by Sarah McLachlan, and it was her song Angel had just come out. And the song that I wrote fully, fully, like I didn't use her melodies. I don't think I even used her chord progressions, but the mood was exactly the same. It was fully inspired by Angel by Sarah McLachlan. And I didn't show it to anybody for a long time for exactly that reason. But looking back on it, I can see that like even though the style was similar, what I ended up doing with it was different, and it actually provided an incredible piece of growth for me because the lyrics that I wrote to go along with it, I didn't realize how like meaningful the lyrics were until like recently. So like even though I started in the style of someone else, I ended up making that song my own. And nowadays, I would never say that that song wasn't legitimate. Like I did something real with that, even though I started in the style of someone else. So like maybe instead of saying that my song was written in the style of Sarah McLachlan, maybe what I could say instead was that Sarah McLachlan, by releasing the song Angel, gave me permission to also write a song that was a solo voice over a warm piano, right? Because her song gave me courage to do the same. So, in a nutshell, I don't even remember if I answered the question. Yeah, Noel Gallagher wrote most of his music by copying Kinks and Beatles songs. Then I'm in great company. Amazing. So, yeah, but I'll put that down as as another topic. Maybe I can talk more about that, but thank you very much. Wow, 2 hours. This was, I'm surprised, but then I'm not surprised. My last webinar went longer than I expected to. I kind of thought I'd have like an hour here, but just there was a lot to talk about. So thank you so much for attending this live stream. I hope that it was enjoyable and informative, and I hope more than anything that you feel empowered to take your next steps by yourself. I would really appreciate if you could provide me feedback by completing the feedback form. I read all comments and I take them all into consideration. Your genuine, honest feedback can only help me become better at this. And so all your suggestions, good, bad, the ugly, I'll take them, okay? And if you have any questions, just reach out, okay? Thank you so much. Best wishes on your next step of your piano journey, which I hope includes writing music of your own. Take care.